35-year-old called Ray Walker, who had been a very important member of the panel about a decade ago. He played on the team around the time of when Liam Hayes was the manager, but he dropped off the panel and then obviously had a good club year last year with O'Hanrahan's and Carlow. And I got called back into the panel by Turlough O'Brien around about November, December time. So he played essentially 3 months and was active in the league, got tested out of competition at a training session, and a month later, so that would have been in February. He was tested. In March, he got the adverse analytical finding. So they sent the A sample off to Cologne, and it came back positive for metabolites of meldonium, which is that was a striking aspect of this case. Meldonium, I had never heard of meldonium until it became a thing with Maria Sharapova. You might remember meldonium was totally legal, and then entered that grey area that they have where they're like, hang on a second, a lot of people seem to be taking this thing. Why are they taking it? Are there any performance-enhancing elements to it? And then eventually WADA, after a year of putting it on the watch list, moved it to the banned list. And that's why Maria Sharapova ended up serving a ban. So that was the drug in question. They found metabolites of that in the A sample, and that was at the end of March. And in early April, essentially, he accepted the findings and said that he would take the 4-year suspension. Now, I should hasten to add that there is still a process to go through, because the reasoned decision of Sport Ireland was handed down 20 days ago, and you have 21 days to appeal. So WADA could appeal, the GAA could appeal, or it is still open, obviously, although we've seen a statement from him tonight for Ray Walker to appeal. He won't be appealing according to the statement that he's issued to the GPA in the last hour or so. So that would seem to bring an end to this part of the story, but it certainly raises plenty of questions.
It does. I'll just give people a sense of Ray Walker's statement this evening. He says, I'm 35 years old. I returned to the Carlow Senior panel last November following a long absence. I am the player who was at the centre of recent reports about an anti-doping violation. In light of the 4-year ban which I now have to serve, which ends my inter-county career and most likely my club involvement given my age, I want to put the following on record. I did not intentionally take any banned substance. Anything that was found in my system was there completely unintentionally. I cannot explain for sure how the substance came to be in my system, but I was taking anti-inflammatories for a lower stomach issue around the time of the test. I'm accepting the 4-year ban because I want this episode over and done with, and at 35, even a lesser ban would still mean I was unlikely to ever return to playing. It is not an admission of intentional wrongdoing on my part in any way. He says, finally, from the time that I rejoined the Carlow panel in November to the time the test took place in February, I did not receive any anti-doping training or education. I will be making no further comment on this matter and would appreciate that the media would respect my privacy in this regard. That clears up something for me, Ger, because I'd seen the 4-year ban was being accepted, and yet Ray Walker was saying this was unintentional. Now, generally what happens, and we've seen this in the case of James Cronin, for instance, and others, it's a general point. Your starting point is a 4-year ban, and if it's unintentional, then and that's accepted, you drop to a 2-year ban. And then if there are other mitigating circumstances, you can receive a much lesser ban than the 2 years, i.e. in James Cronin's case, we've been through those mitigating circumstances, and he has a 1-month ban. But Ray Walker here has decided that even though I'm stating on the record it was unintentional, given that we're still talking about a 2-year plan minus mitigating circumstances, I'm just going to accept the 4-year ban whilst maintaining it was unintentional.
Yeah, and look, you can see how that might make sense to somebody who's at the end of their career anyway. Maybe he was going back for one last hurrah and was going to call time, irrespective of what happened at the end of this year. We're not going to have football. We're unlikely to have club football until very late in the year. Who knows? Maybe that factored into his thinking right now. In these cases, though, it's always good to actually get to the bottom. Like, how did somebody end up getting meldonium in their system, and what are the implications of that? The other thing that is interesting is that the line that you said at the end there about in my time back, I didn't receive any anti-doping education. This is the second GAA player in history, essentially, to have tested positive and to be banned for testing positive. Obviously, there was a previous example where somebody did test positive. It was an inhaler, and there was no ban served. In the most recent case, it was Thomas Connolly of Monaghan, and this was back in February 2015. He was tested. He also was essentially a fringe member of the Monaghan panel. He'd been a reasonable minor, better under 21, played a few McKenna Cup games, and then got a league game, but was like on the fringes. And so in the report that the hearings committee published and sent back to everybody to say exactly what had happened, why it had happened, and to detail exactly what happened in that case, they were very strong in, and this is a direct quote, "We would urge the GAA to intensify its work to ensure that all players, county officers, coaches, managers, medical and allied sports science personnel and players' representatives are fully cognizant of their obligations under the association's anti-doping rules." Obviously, everybody's responsible for what is in their own body. That's the founding principle of all anti-doping policy. You are responsible for whatever is in your own body. Otherwise, there's no point in us having conversations about it. At the same time, if you're 35 and the last time you were on a panel is quite a long time ago, and it's not really a focus of all personnel involved in the team, that you need to get up to speed very quickly on what's going on with anti-doping, you can see how that might not be front of mind for everybody, where conversations might not be had about, well, what tablets are you on, what supplements are you on, who are you getting them from. I'm given to understand that there have been some changes since this first case happened. So at the time of the Thomas Connolly incident in Monaghan, as far as I'm aware, everybody had to like physically sit down and be tutored on a case by case basis. So like the Monaghan squad would have had a tutor come to them and sit with them for half an hour. They've subsequently moved that online, so you can now apparently do that in your own time. So that is some sense of the progress that was made, but I don't know if it's enough. And I really don't want this to just become a pile-on for one individual who at the end of his playing career ends up stupidly taking something, when it looks like there are probably this should be a learning day for a lot of inter-county teams out there going, Jesus, are we doing enough on this?
Yeah. No, it's a very fair point. So that's Ray Walker. As you mentioned, there's Thomas Connolly. There's Brendan O'Sullivan as well, who served a 21-week ban for unintentionally taking something he shouldn't have taken owing to a contaminated batch of supplement that he picked up in a health store. So, you can't educate enough when these things are happening. But that's 3 GAA players now who've fallen on the wrong side of testing in a relatively short space of time, which does suggest there is very arguably some kind of deficit when it comes to education. Is it being hammered on by counties each year? They may feel, well, we've done this last year and we did it the year before, and you almost overlook the fact that you have 2, 3, 4 new players coming on board every year. There is a constant turnover. It doesn't seem like we'll get to the bottom of how the Meldonium ended up in Ray Walker's system. He says he doesn't know how. As you rightly said, I mean, this is very much, it's not something we associate with this part of the world. Maria Sharapova, the high-profile example, Latvian maid, very much synonymous with Eastern European athletes. And as you said, it was the European Games in 2015 when this was really on a watch list. And they noticed that at the European Games, of the 762 athletes there, 66 were taking Meldonium. And quite rightly, WADA and authorities said, well, that is an excessive and inappropriate use in what they called was a generally healthy demographic of the population. And so from that point on, it was gone from 2016, which is when Maria Sharapova fell foul. But I can't think of another instance where an Irish athlete had traces of Meldonium. So that's where we are in this then. It would appear if Ray Walker is making the decision not to appeal, that will be that, and the 4-year ban will come into effect.
Yeah, and look, I think you should be banned when you take a banned substance, and I think everybody accepts that. I guess if there are some subtleties around a situation like this, just briefly on the Meldonium, obviously it is an angina medication, so why all those healthy athletes were taking it, I don't know. And if you just doing a bit of research on it this evening again, I can only find one other person in the history of Meldonium positives who's actually taken the 4-year ban. So generally, everybody has kind of come up with something that has mitigated the ban from 4 years too. So you do feel like if he was a professional athlete with the full might of a massive legal team and a medical team behind him, they'd have been able to make sure that this wasn't a 4-year ban, which would, again, just kind of make you feel a little bit queasy about how fair the justice system is when it's really only fair if you have access to the best lawyers and the best doctors. And look, certainly talking to GAA people today, they were like 4 years, and other people in other sports maybe not getting 4 years. This is essentially a club player who had a good season, who ends up joining a panel and doesn't have quite the same backroom team and the same medical team as a lot of the other GAA teams out there. Not to mitigate the fact that he had this in his system and he shouldn't have had it in his system. But there's just, I don't know, there's an uneasiness about this thing where, in your local community, you can find yourself having questions to answer about something, and it's on the basis that you had a few good club matches at the end of last season.
Yeah, well, we'll see where it goes from here. He's asked for privacy, and again, he has said, I'm accepting the 4-year ban because I want the episode over and done with, and at 35, even a lesser ban would mean I was unlikely to ever return to playing. It is not an admission of intentional wrongdoing on my part in any way. Offtheball.com is where you can read Ger's story, has all the details there for the last couple of hours or so. Richie, elsewhere, we should kick on with the news round. Where do you want to start?
We'll start in France. It's an ever-evolving situation pretty much by the minute over there this evening. The French Sports Ministry has this evening left the door open for Ligue 1 and the top 14 there to finish their seasons in August. Earlier today, French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe announced an extension to the ban on major sporting events to the end of August. French Football League officials are holding an EGM tonight to discuss Philippe's decision and how it affects their season. However, the Ministry for Sports say that at this stage, and barring major deterioration in the health situation in France, leagues may consider ending their season in August or in September should they decide. The Tour de France, we know, has been rearranged to start on August 29th. That looks like it will be unaffected by either the decree of Philippe today or the Ministry for Sport as well. And the European rugby chiefs are saying that they are committed to completing the Champions Cup season. They have 3 French quarter-finalists in the Heineken Champions Cup this season.
Ger, it's funny, frantically every evening we get the latest dispatches from the football leagues, and we've got this plan and we've got that plan and we do it this date and return to train on that date, and then suddenly the French Prime Minister comes out and says no, nothing until September, and it just reminds you it's a public health issue. And even in Germany I saw the reproduction rate has gone from 0.7 back up to 1, i.e. if I get it I will infect one person as opposed to 0.7 a person, as they've eased restrictions. So for all the planning going on at the moment with football and the best intentions, we're always just one day away from Prime Minister standing in front of a camera and saying, no chance.
Exactly. And I guess this is about what kind of world do you want to live in right now? Do you want to live in a world where we're dreaming about this thing and it's happening while at the same time your inner monologue is like, there's no real chance of this actually happening? Or do you want to live in the cold hard facts of like, let's write this year off? I think I actually like a little bit of the hope, I like a little bit of the dreaming, and who knows if the collective weight of humanity might come up with a solution that we haven't thought of just yet, or a treatment that we haven't thought of just yet. That's the easier way to get through this week by week, I think. Yeah, well, I'm not sure what happens to Champions League either. All that's now up in the air. UEFA were certainly hoping to finish Champions League in August, I think it was, Rich.
Yeah, Nasser Al-Khelaifi, the PSG president, who has his own troubles this evening as well, he's actually suggested that if the Champions League is to continue and that PSG aren't allowed to play games at home, or at least in front of crowds, then he'd be open to the prospect of PSG essentially playing games outside of France to get the whole thing done. So they're open to ideas, essentially.
Michael Robinson then?
Yeah, tributes pouring in all day for the former Republic of Ireland striker who died at the age of 61. Mark Lawrenson mourned the passing of someone he'd known since his teens and with whom he won the European Cup in 1984. Robinson won 24 Ireland caps. He also played for Brighton, Manchester City and Osasuna. He'd been a media figure in Spain for 30 years, pretty much since his retirement as a player. And the likes of Sergio Ramos, Rafa Nadal and Barcelona head coach Quique Setien joined the tributes today. Graham Souness was Robinson's Liverpool captain on that famous night in Rome in 84.
And my friendship started when he first joined Liverpool. We used to go to the Top Hat on a Thursday night for dinner, his wife and my wife. And then obviously we become great pals at Liverpool. And Kenny wasn't on a trip. I remember I went to Israel once. We roomed together and we roomed in other places as well when Kenny was maybe injured. And he was a close pal of mine. And I'm absolutely sick for his family. It's a sad day for me. And it was only, I've tried to ring him a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. And Michael is a very emotional man, and he wouldn't pick up the phone anymore to me. And it was only last night I'm thinking I'm going to try him until I get him. And I thought I won't ring him now because he may be, in his bed, having an early bed. And I was going to ring him today. And I've not got a chance to speak to him.
Yeah, I was watching that this morning and it would catch your throat, and he was very upset. He had tears in his eyes. And Mark Lawrenson, we've recorded it already, he's on the football show later on, and he was saying that Graham and Michael Robinson were really good friends. So you can imagine that awful moment for him. And also, like, his career in Spanish media, I was aware of it. It somewhat passed me by just how popular he was until you're seeing, like, I think I saw the news, Ger, when Rafa Nadal, to his millions of followers, was a picture of him and Michael Robinson arm in arm, saying how much he was going to miss this guy and how big a part of his childhood he was. Yeah,
it's an incredible achievement to go over in your second language, become essentially the Gary Lineker / Des Lynam / you. Yeah. And that's an incredible achievement to do that, not in your first language. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, so we'll talk to Mark Lawrenson about him. It seems like he was an incredible character and they all loved him at Liverpool, even though he was only there for a year. Now, Una May is going to be on later on of Sport Ireland. Richie, the 2019 anti-doping review was published today. We'll in the main be talking about that, but she was asked in the press conference about the Cronin situation.
Yeah, John Tracy was. They're reviewing the James Cronin doping violation. The Munster prop banned for a month after a sample taken in November showed traces of 2 banned substances. Cronin put the presence down to a dispensing error at a pharmacy. John Tracy says they're reviewing the case, which could end up with them appealing. Meanwhile, Sport Ireland's 29 anti-doping figures showed a total of 7 violations. There were 5 adverse analytical findings, while the balance were anti-doping rule violation cases. 3 of the 7 have been announced, while 4 are still pending.
Yeah, I read this report today. We'll talk to Una May after 8 o'clock. This was before Ger had the story on Ray Walker, so that doesn't feature, but lots of interesting things in it. Basically, of the 3 that we know about from 2019, one is Brandon Mealy, the League of Ireland footballer who left the ground before finishing his test. He gave his reasons as to why. The other is an Irish wrestler who was a 3-month ban for cannabis. The other is a motorsport, a driver, a 4-month ban for cannabis. And then the year before that, the only positive was a boxer, Evan Metcalf, who also had a cannabis derivative. It seems cannabis is the main thing they're finding. They're spending 1.9 million per year, 1,300 tests, blood and urine samples. 79% of tests are out of competition. The most tested athletes are cyclists, followed by rugby, and then athletics as well. And the other thing I saw in the report, Ger, they've hired an experienced and professional investigator who works with the Gardaí, a former guard himself or herself, I'm not sure, him or her, and the Food Safety Authority as well, to help them with their investigation. So they're doing what they can, but cannabis is about the most they're finding in terms of positive tests.
Yeah, I look on the cannabis issue, I think we all need to wake up and stop testing for cannabis and stop trying to chase cannabis, and like that's a legalization generally conversation to be had, but loads of other sports are beginning to wake up to this. America, for example, the NFL are no longer going to ban people for testing positive for cannabis, and it's not going to go on your record. They see it as like a way of dealing with pain for the athletes there. I do wonder, and I constantly kind of ask this question about, so 2 million quid from our entire sports budget is going on anti-doping. Is this the best use of our resources? And I haven't come to the point of saying no, we shouldn't be testing, because we obviously need to be testing and trying to catch people. But it is good to hear that we're spending money now investigating, as opposed to just waiting for the positive test to happen. Because we all know that essentially to test positive, like this is a test of your ability to read instructions and to time things out on the calendar properly. If you're on a doping program, as opposed to inadvertently ingesting something, which obviously everybody says they did when they do end up testing positive. So I wonder, is this the right use of 2 million, considering how little we spend on sport anyway?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, certainly she makes the point, and we can play it after 8 o'clock, that this is a deterrent as much as anything. And for instance, 83 samples have been put into cold storage and can be tested for up to, I think it's the next 10 years, certainly. So, and they're not just picked at random. And she was, of that opinion as well, that they have reasons for keeping those 83. So, what other deterrent might we have?
I don't know. And that's the thing. I don't know, because it doesn't. Does the testing give you confidence that the sport that you're watching is fair and that people aren't taking drugs? And look, I don't know. Maybe as time progresses, you just stop caring so much about this stuff. And I don't know. You just get exhausted by the constant stream of drug stories. But then you think and look at the situation in South Africa, where there are teenagers doping to get rugby contracts, and you think, well, why would there not be teenagers doping to get rugby contracts here, especially when we're not really testing the kids in schools rugby? And if it's happening in rugby, why would it not happen in soccer? And if it's happening in soccer, like, why would it not happen in GAA? So,
Never ends.
do we want to know the truth? I'm not sure.
We do, though. I mean, you know, we do. You do as well, really. It's a very grim path all the way through.
And it's non-stop.
Yeah.
Like it is definitely, you push the rock up the hill and it comes back down. You push the rock up the hill and it comes back down. And it's like another doping story. Like, you know, I would love to be talking about, is today Champions League night? It is Champions League night. So, like, wouldn't it be so much better? Like, so there are some years you can actually ignore the anti-doping reports and go, that's okay, we've done enough on that story now. We actually don't need to know about the 3 tests who ended up testing positive for marijuana. I don't know. It just grims you out eventually.
Yeah, it does. It's never ending. You definitely get that impression. We'll talk to her after 8 o'clock. Loads of interesting pieces in it. And as Richie said, they still have to make up their minds on the James Cronin situation. She certainly said money would be no object. I asked her about the financial implications of appealing any case. And she said, well, if we feel it needs appealing, we can go to government and money will be made available, which was an interesting point. Rich, is there any last story you want to bring us before we move on?
Yeah, League of Ireland clubs, they've been presented with a best practice document for resuming games behind closed doors. Football here is suspended until mid-June, and a return with empty stadiums is one of the options being explored by the FAI and the National League Executive Committee. Today's document has also seen input from the Players Association, the PFAI. According to the Irish Independent's Dan McDonnell, some of the measures included in the document are players taking temperature tests at home before training sessions. 2 team buses for away games will be used. No GPS gear will be used, and there'll be no contact training initially. Okay.
That is our news round for this evening. Richie, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Cheers.
Ger Gilroy, don't be a stranger. Let's do this again sometime.
Anytime.
There we go. That's the news round for this evening. After 9 o'clock, we have Mark Lawrenson talking about Michael Robinson. 8 o'clock, Dr. Una May recorded earlier on this morning. And up next, we're continuing our Virgin Media series. It should be a Champions League night, as we've said. And so what we've done in lieu of those is get the likes of David McWilliams or Neil Mellor or Ken Doherty to pick out a favourite Champions League game. Stewie Byrne played in one in Dublin. Pretty historic night. So we're going to talk to Stewie next.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
Have a great evening with itsforwomen.ie. Great value car insurance on the web, on demand, on the go. Itsforwomen.ie. It's always on hand. It's always online.